combat sirens tear through the Caribbean sky, turning the deep blue sea into a boiling cauldron of tension. 3 Venezuelan Guayquerí-class warships surge forward at full speed, forming an arrow formation aiming straight at the American fleet. Their target is the nuclear floating fortress USS Gerald R. Ford, the invincible pride of the United States Navy. This is no ordinary drill, but the most direct and insane act of provocation in modern history. The distance shrinks rapidly to under 5 nautical miles, shattering all international maritime safety protocols. Every warning signal on emergency frequencies is ignored by Venezuela, as a terrifying silence blankets the air. On the U.S. destroyer bridge, Aegis radar screens flash red, and automated weapon systems have unlocked their safeties. Why would a crisis-ridden nation dare to provoke the superpower right in Washington's strategic backyard? Is there an invisible hand from rival superpowers pulling the strings behind this risky sacrificial pawn move? One small mistake, one trembling finger on the trigger now will ignite the fuse for total war. The U.S. Fleet Admiral coldly broadcasts the final ultimatum: turn back immediately or you will be destroyed. One single mistake in the next few seconds will turn the azure Caribbean waters into a graveyard of burning steel and fire. The Caribbean sun hangs high, the tropical heat blurring the image of 3 small black dots on the southern horizon. It is the Avante 2200 class corvette squadron of the Venezuelan Navy, small sea wolves but full of sharp claws. Leading the spearhead is the Guayquerí, displacing merely 2,400 tons but carrying a spirit of death. Facing them is a colossal wall of steel, the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group worth $13 billion. The disparity in power is a terrifying figure, like throwing an egg against a rock in an asymmetrical war. However, Venezuelan warships suddenly accelerate, diesel engines roaring to push the ships at 25 knots. They execute classic wolfpack tactics, splitting into a 3-pronged pincer movement to disperse the American fleet's firepower. This is a bold move, exploiting American overconfidence to penetrate the kill zone where firepower is strongest. On the radar screens of the cruiser USS Normandy, electronic warfare officers are stunned by strange incoming signals. The Venezuelan ships are not just moving, they have activated Thales fire control radars, an extremely dangerous action. Radar waves paint the U.S. carrier's command tower directly, sending a clear message that I have locked the target. Under international rules of engagement, this radar lock is equivalent to loading a gun and pointing it at an enemy's head. Simultaneously, electronic warfare systems on Venezuelan ships begin emitting jamming beams of unprecedented high power. Displays on U.S. destroyers flicker, showing dozens of false targets, causing momentary chaos in the command chain. Military analysts assess that this jamming equipment is certainly not a domestic product manufactured by Caracas. Technical signatures reveal traces of Russian technology, possibly an export version of the renowned Krasuka 4 system. Moscow seems to have silently upgraded its allies' capabilities, turning aging ships into a genuine threat. Inside the USS Gerald Ford's Combat Information Center, the tension is so thick it could almost be cut with a knife. The fleet admiral grips the armrest, eyes glued to the tactical screen that is flashing incessantly. He understands the enemy is playing a psychological warfare game that is extremely cruel and full of deadly traps. Venezuela has no intention of sinking the U.S. carrier, knowing it is impossible with their current firepower. Their true goal is provocation, forcing American sailors to lose their cool and fire the first shot. If the U.S. fires first, Washington falls into a media trap, becoming the bully attacking a smaller nation. Images of U.S. warships destroying Venezuelan vessels would go global, giving Russia and China a pretext for political intervention. But Americans, with centuries of naval warfare experience, do not easily let emotions override reason in decisive moments. The Admiral orders maintenance of the highest combat readiness, but absolutely no missile firing is allowed. Instead, he unleashes a soft but heavy deterrent response worthy of a military superpower. 2 MH-60R Seahawk anti-submarine helicopter squadrons immediately leave the deck, rotors slicing the wind toward the target. These helicopters do not fly high, but skim the sea surface at an altitude of only 15 meters, right above the rough waves. They circle the 3 Venezuelan ships, engine noise drowning out the ocean waves, creating extreme psychological pressure. Weapon bay doors hang open, showing off Hellfire missiles and light torpedoes loaded and ready for action. U.S. pilots broadcast via high-powered loudspeakers, demanding Venezuelan ships change course or face severe consequences. From the deck of the Guayquerí, Venezuelan sailors can clearly see the cold smile of the machine gunner on the helicopter. However, the response to that stern warning is a terrifyingly eerie silence from the opposing ships. Not only do they not slow down, but they continue to surge forward, closing the gap to a dangerous 2,000 meters. On the destroyer USS Thomas Hudner, the Phalanx CIWS autocannon begins to spin, its electric motor whining piercingly. The 20mm 6-barrel cannon points straight at the Venezuelan bow, ready to unleash a rain of 4,000 rounds per minute. U.S. sailors stand by the ship's railing, assault rifles in hand, eyes never leaving the target for a single second. Tension has reached its peak. Just one small bang, even accidental, will turn this place into hell. And just when the Americans think the enemy will flinch before overwhelming power, the unthinkable happens. A launch hatch on the Venezuelan ship suddenly pops open, revealing a cold gray anti-ship missile warhead. It is the upgraded C-802 missile, a ship killer whose technology China has transferred to many nations. This act of opening the launch hatch has crossed the final red line of strategic patience set by the U.S. The U.S. Admiral takes a deep breath, his finger moving to the fleet-wide red alert button, preparing for the worst-case scenario. But he still waits, waiting for the moment the missile actually leaves the launcher to have a legitimate reason to wipe out the enemy. Meanwhile, Russian and Chinese reconnaissance satellites in orbit are constantly snapping photos, transmitting data to command centers. The whole world seems to hold its breath, all eyes fixed on the small Caribbean Sea now holding global explosive power. Is this the bravery of Venezuelan soldiers, or the blindness of a regime being backed into a corner? The answer is about to be revealed in Fire and Steel, as the collision distance is counted down in mere seconds. A dull thud echoes from beneath the surface, shaking the quiet atmosphere of the Caribbean Sea. From the Venezuelan Warships 2, an underwater assassin is unleashed, tearing through the water. It is the 53-65 heavy torpedo, a Soviet-era legacy capable of tracking targets via acoustic homing. This firing act officially shreds all diplomatic efforts, turning tension into a full-scale war. Immediately, early warning systems on the U.S. destroyer scream piercing alarms, signaling incoming death. The USS Thomas Hudner's captain screams into the radio, ordering the deployment of ANSLQ-25 Nixie decoys. The massive ship lists violently as it executes a hard turn, trying to evade the torpedo's deadly path. The torpedo grazes the hull, missing by mere meters, its hiss sending chills down every sailor's spine. But the Venezuelans do not stop there. Their missile hatch covers pop open for a second wave of attack. A C-802 anti-ship cruise missile leaves the launcher, trailing white smoke as it heads straight for the U.S. conning tower. This time, the U.S. Phalanx close-in weapon system no longer maintains its silent observation posture. The 6-barrel beast spins at 4,500 rounds per minute, spitting a rain of tungsten. The machine gun sound is like canvas being ripped, creating an impenetrable wall of fire before the bow. The C-802 missile hits the defensive net, exploding into thousands of glowing fragments in the blue sky. Burning debris falls to the sea like fireworks, marking the complete failure of Venezuela's first strike. However, the real trap is only now being triggered from deep within the South American nation's mainland. U.S. military satellites detect massive heat signatures flaring up from the dense jungles south of Caracas. The Russian-supplied S-300VM Anti-2500 long-range air defense system has officially entered the fight, locking down the sky. S-300 phased array radars sweep the U.S. fleet, creating flashing red lock warnings on every screen. This is a dangerous escalation move, turning the Caribbean into a deadly no-fly zone for the U.S. Air Force. Simultaneously, from El Libertador Air Base, the King Cobras of the sky begin to take off. A squadron of Su-30 Su-30MK2 Flanker G multi-role fighters roars into the sky, fully loaded with anti-ship weapons. These fighters fly extremely low, skimming the waves to use the Earth's curvature to evade radar detection. Their target is not just warships, but to challenge the U.S. Navy's control of the skies. On the USS Gerald R, loudspeakers blare the alert. All pilots to battle stations. FA-18E Super Hornets are catapulted into the air by EMAL's electromagnetic systems in a split second. The Caribbean sky suddenly becomes a bloody arena for the classic showdown between Russian and American technology. On radar screens, two groups of red and blue dots rush at each other at a combined speed of Mach 3. Venezuelan pilots, trained by Russian experts, confidently execute the Pugachev's Cobra maneuver. The Su-30 stands vertical in mid-air, causing the U.S. aircraft's Doppler radar to lose track for a moment. But U.S. pilots, with extensive combat experience, are not easily fooled by technical displays. The U.S. squadron commander coldly orders Fox 3, activating the AIM-120 AMRAAM long-range air-to-air missile. The missile leaves the rail, traveling at Mach 4, seeking the heat from the Sukhoi's engines. The Venezuelan side responds with R-77 Vimpel missiles, creating an interlaced web of fire in midair. A U.S. F-18 must verify deploy flares continuously, turning sharply to evade the missile tailing it. Meanwhile, a less fortunate Su-30MK2 could not escape the clutches of the Grim Reaper. The AMRAAM missile hits the right engine, turning the modern fighter into a giant fireball falling into the sea. The Venezuelan pilot ejects in time, floating in a sky filled with black smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Moscow and Beijing watch every development via satellite. Their silence begins to blanket diplomatic channels. They realize the U.S. is unflinching, and Western weapon systems are operating with deadly efficiency. The dogfight continues fiercely, but the balance of power is tilting toward the American Hornets. However, the threat from the land-based S-300 remains, like a sword of Damocles hanging over the fleet. The U.S. Admiral knows that without blinding the enemy's radar eyes, the fleet will forever be in the crosshairs. He turns to the tactical officer, nodding to authorize Option Z. The most devastating punishment strike? That is when the F-35C Lightning IIs, the stealth ghosts of the ocean, begin taxiing to the runway. This battle will not end in reconciliation, but will end with the complete destruction of the enemy's will. The world holds its breath for the decisive blow, as the #1 superpower prepares to unleash a mountain-crushing punch. The tactical screen on the USS Gerald R switches to total attack mode, ending all restraint efforts. The fleet admiral orders the activation of the Clean Sweep Protocol, a term implying complete destruction. From the runway, 4 F-35C Lightning IIs glide like ghosts, carrying silent death with them. This is the first time in the region that 5th-generation stealth fighters are deployed in major combat. Upon takeoff, they vanish completely from Venezuelan radar screens thanks to secret radio-absorbing paint. The S-300VM air defense system on the ground sweeps frantically, but receives only terrifying emptiness on its screens. U.S. pilots leisurely fly through the kill zone, looking down on their opponents like gods from above. The first target is the enemy's eyes, the fire control radar station threatening the U.S. fleet. AGM-88G ARGM-ER anti-radiation missiles leave the weapon bay, homing in on the radar source at supersonic speed. A second later, a blinding explosion erupts at the coastal missile site, sending a black smoke column hundreds of meters high. Venezuela's most modern S-300 system has been completely blinded, turning into useless scrap metal in an instant. With the protective sky umbrella torn apart, the fate of the 3 warships offshore is sealed. U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers simultaneously open their vertical launch cells, unleashing a rain of death. Dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles and LRASM anti-ship missiles roar away, creating a terrifying spectacle. On the Guayquerí, the Venezuelan captain sees black dots approaching from the horizon and knows it is all over. With no interception systems and no retreat, they can only watch death approaching at Mach 0.9. The first missile hits the flagship's starboard side, piercing the armor and detonating right inside the ammunition magazine. A massive pillar of fire rises, tearing the ship in two, tossing the multi-ton turret into the air like a toy. The remaining 2 ships try to scatter in desperation, but the intelligent U.S. guidance systems do not let go. The LRASM missile automatically adjusts its trajectory, diving onto the target with absolute surgical precision. Continuous explosions thunder across the sea, turning the 3 prides of the Venezuelan Navy into 3 burning torches. Oil spills across the water, fire spreads, and the acrid smell of metal and gunpowder covers a vast sea area. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Venezuelan attack force has been completely wiped off the military map. At the Kremlin and Zhongnanhai, satellite monitoring screens simultaneously lose signals from the Allied fleet. Russian generals are stunned by the terrifying destruction, speed, and absolute technological dominance of the US. China immediately orders its aircraft carrier to turn back, staying far away from the conflict zone to avoid collateral damage. They realize that despite military modernization, the combat gap with the US remains a vast abyss. A cold but clear message has been sent: never wake a sleeping giant. The U.S. Admiral orders a ceasefire, and the F-35Cs perform a victory lap in the smoky sky before returning. The Caribbean returns to its inherent calm, but deep below lie the wrecks of those who dared challenge the world order. The war ends as quickly as it began, leaving a bloody lesson about the balance of power in the 21st century. Black smoke slowly dissipates over the Caribbean, leaving drifting debris as painful evidence of a blind ambition. In Caracas, silence blankets the presidential palace. Gone are the eloquent declarations or stern threats of before. The Venezuelan government is forced to accept an unconditional ceasefire, paving the way for international inspectors to enter and monitor. The USS Gerald R carrier fleet remains anchored offshore, standing like a steel fortress affirming absolute power. Moscow and Beijing quietly withdraw support ships, tacitly admitting they are not strong enough to challenge Washington here. This 10-minute event of terror is an expensive lesson on the value of military deterrence in the 21st century. A small nation cannot use momentary recklessness to bridge the technological gap with a military superpower. Peace is truly fragile. It is not protected by promises, but protected by genuine destructive power. A new world order has been re-established in these waters, where the strong set the rules and the weak must obey. Today, America has proven that it never backs down when core interests and national honor are threatened. Will this bloody scenario repeat itself in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait in the near future? The answer lies in each nation's preparation, for in this cruel world, weakness is a major sin. Thank you for watching today's special strategic simulation analysis on the U.S. Military Channel. Please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the upcoming shocking military scenarios.